Well, the Gonzaga women's basketball program has been a mainstay in the NCAA tournament in recent years, thanks to the great work of today's guest, head coach Lisa Fortier. Lisa talks about the two newcomers on the team, the rivalry with BYU, and how the transfer portal and NIL have impacted women's basketball. All right, here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Don't go away.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. I am super excited for today's episode. It's been, of course, an exciting run for both the men's and the women's basketball programs at Gonzaga for decades, frankly, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by the head coach of the Gonzaga women's basketball program, Lisa Fortier, to talk about this program's recent run of success and what the team is going to look like next year. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's been so fun to follow this team. And I think one thing that I've always noticed when following the team is at the end of every year, there's always seems to be this kind of talk about like which players are leaving. You know, you're losing the Worth twins, or you're losing Jill Townsend or Laura Stockton or Zykira Rice or whoever it may be. And concern of like, is the program going to stay, moving forward? Are they going to keep progressing? And every year it seems to be the case. And this year, we're kind of talking about a similar topic with Sierra Walker out the door, but now we have this transfer out of Utah, Brynna Maxwell, Destiny Burton joining the squad from Panola College. I'd love to hear a little bit more about those two players and kind of what they bring to this team next year.
Yeah, well, I would say that I feel the same way. I think every year when we graduate good players, and that's by design. For good programs, you want to be graduating good players every year. And so, if you didn't, then you probably wouldn't have been very good the year before. So, but it is a little bit worrisome. So Brynna is certainly going to fill a role that Sierra had last year. I think difference in those two would be, I think Sierra has traditionally guarded, a lot of point guards. I don't know if we're going to have Brynna do that. She's got more size to her. Brynna is a proven shooter, though, and a scorer. She's been able to score a lot of different places on the floor. She's about 5 inches taller than Sierra, so I think we're going to be able to post her up some inside. Yep. I mean, she's just well established. On our roster, we return 3 pretty veteran players in the Truongs and Yvonne. But then and everyone else I think is poised and ready to make a jump. But adding Brynna just gives us a little bit more stability. And I think a proven player who's experienced it to help bridge that gap between 2 years of big time graduation. It's not just last year. We graduated 5 the year prior, and then we graduated 5 again last year. So in 2 years, we've graduated 10 players off of our team, which is pretty significant.
Yeah, that's a tremendous amount of talent to lose and still be able to recoup it and obviously have the success that the program had last year. You mentioned Yvonne, and I kind of wanted to touch on her a little bit because one of the other things that I've noticed kind of following this program is a very good job of kind of seeing players progress from bench player, maybe very little playing time early on, and then kind of gradually play more and more, and then kind of blossom into a starter, a significant contributor. By the time they're juniors or seniors, we saw it with Melody Kempton last year, obviously had a tremendous season after being somebody who didn't play as much early on. Yvonne obviously had a big role last year, but it seems like she's primed to have a really big role next year. What are your kind of hopes and thoughts for her heading into next season?
Yeah, I mean, she's certainly ready. If I've gotten one message from some of our fans about whether or not Yvonne's going to start, I've gotten 150,000. I mean, they just like keep coming in. Same people, same question. And again, the way that it works, we had Anna and Mel who were different. Mel and Bonnie were very similar as far as what they brought to the table, how they would attack their size. And so we just thought last year it was great to have Anna as a defensive player, a shot blocker, a different kind of enforcer. And then you bring in Yvonne, you bring in Kaylin Truong, and it changes things. When you can bring energy off the bench, other teams sub, and usually there's a letdown. But when we've been able to sub and bring in maybe people think a more powerful hit sometimes, then that's a huge advantage to us. And so, you had mentioned Destiny Burton, and I think she's going to be a nice role piece, but Yvonne is certainly ready to take over as that primary offensive post player or forward, however you want to call him. She's got a lot. She just continues to grow. She's in the gym asking Coach Craig if we can have harder workouts, can have a harder workout. And his are pretty hard. So it's not like they're easy workouts to begin with, but she's just really trying to expand her perimeter game. She's trying to get better at her drive game. She's trying to guard better. She's just really interested in being her very best. And it's really fun to coach players like that. But this will be the second year in a row. I mean, Mel was the 6th player of the year. And then she comes in and she's a tournament MVP. She's a first team all conference player the year following. Bonnie was the 6th player of the year. And, there's a lot of potential for her to do the same kind of things as Mel, even more than that, possibly even.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Truong twins already in that question, and I kind of want to touch on them too, not just because they've been staples for the program for a couple of years, but recently they got a really cool opportunity to go to Vietnam to play in the Southeast Asian Games. We heard from them a little bit on the podcast a few weeks ago, an audio that they did with Brynna Green of KREM, and just kind of talking about that experience. And for you, obviously, it must be very cool to see them get this kind of opportunity to play internationally and kind of represent their country, but also represent Gonzaga across the pond. And I'm curious kind of your thoughts on how that went and what you've heard from them since they've been back.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of players who've played with their national teams. We've had a few play for the U.S. in different levels. Courtney Vandersloot and Caitlin Redmond and Kayla Standish did some stuff with USA basketball, but more often they've come from our international players coming in. So the Truongs are in a unique situation as Americans with the Vietnamese passport. And I think, so that's been something new for us to work through that and help them with that process. But I think they had a tremendous time over there. I think it was really meaningful for their family. I don't know if either of their parents had been back to Vietnam. I don't believe that they had, since they had come to the United States. And the twins, Lee and Lynn, certainly had not been over there. And so I think it was meaningful for them to go back to where their parents had come from. And also just to, they speak the language, but they've never been immersed in it in the cultural experience like that, besides within their family. So I think the cultural piece was probably the most impactful to them. They're well supported at Gonzaga. We have tons of fans, and you've been there. It's full, but it was even more than that. And for 3-on-3 and for the turnout that they had overseas, I think was overwhelming to both of them. I know Lynn has talked a lot about it, and I think that made a huge impact for her, just how many people came out to watch their team play and to support them, and how much they just loved them. A little bit of like a fandom type of situation for them. And so I think that the basketball was good. I think they were hoping that they would get a gold, and they didn't end up with one of those. They had done well in that Bali tournament prior, the warm up in the 3-on-3, but weren't able to come away with a gold, but still just a great experience. I think something that they're going to continue to want to play for the Vietnamese national team going forward. And hopefully kind of got things started, or just showing what basketball, Vietnamese basketball could be like. And I know they played with some great teammates, so that was a good part. They keep talking about the food too. I don't know if they told you, but the food was apparently authentic and better than anything they can find around here.
Yeah, not surprised by that. All right, we are going to come back in the second segment, and Lisa and I are going to discuss the rivalry with BYU, what it's like to play in front of a very passionate fan base in Spokane, the growth of the WCC. But before we do that, I want to tell you all about LinkedIn. As the sun comes out and small businesses are back in business, LinkedIn Jobs makes it easier to grow your team. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people you want to interview faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring, so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading companies. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. One of the things I loved about being at Gonzaga was not just that obviously the men's games are packed for every single game and they're going to continue to be packed, but the women's games are packed too. And they always have been, at least they were when I was there. They appear to be for the games that I watch on TV. It still looks like the place is pretty much a full house day in and day out. And that's not always the case for a lot of other women's programs at other colleges, even colleges that have prominent men's programs. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on how special it is to be able to coach a team that draws as well as Gonzaga does, and how the players kind of react to being in an arena that's full most of the time.
Yeah. Who were the women's players when you were at Gonzaga, Andy?
I graduated in 2013, so I was right around Slutes. That's Kayla,
Palmer, Jasmine Redmond. Yeah.
Yep. All of them.
Okay. For us, it's the student athlete experience. And when we talk to recruits and we talk to other people, we're hoping that other people can increase their attendance, because our athletes, every single time they come out and play at home, have an amazing student athlete experience, whether it's a true sellout or just pretty full. I mean, it always feels like it's pretty full. And, a lot of our fans don't understand that it's not like that everywhere.
Yeah.
They think because that's what it's like at the Zags games, that it's like that wherever we go, and it's just not the case. And so I feel so lucky that we get to put our players in a position as coaches and as a program where every time they go out, they're going to have a great experience. You're not going to be thinking, there's not that many people here, or, I have to create some energy. There's energy in the building. It's an electric environment. Even on our days, during Christmas break, the students or the band, our students kind of ebb and flow. We're trying to consistently build that up. And I know the Kennel Club this year tried to be a more consistent presence, but the band is amazing. And that's made up of students. So even when our student section's gone, this year we had, the band was out of town, and we had about 250 little kids who signed up for, with their teams that showed up. And so marketing and the administration do a great job of filling in those seats when it's not the traditional setting where we have, our band and our student population and that. So I just think we're a huge part of the community, and the guys are superstars in the community, and we know that, but our players are too. They might appeal to slightly different demographics, but I'll tell you what, when I'm in Costco on a Sunday, I can't go 2 feet without someone saying, "Great job, coach," or unfortunately, sometimes we don't win all of them. "Oh, coach, you guys should have done this a little better." And our players, I know, feel that too when they go any restaurant, anywhere. It's nice to be an important part of a community like the Spokane community.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, my best friend in college, my roommate, was a part of the band, and he clamored for everybody all the time. Go to women's games, go to games. They're fun. And obviously the band has such an integral role in kind of making that environment. And it's very cool to see, again, looking at other schools. I've worked in higher education. I've worked at other universities, and that kind of energy is not there. And it's really cool to see that for every basketball game that happens at Gonzaga, not just for the men's side. It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
BYU is the next thing that I wanted to talk about. They're out the door. Conference realignment is a very hot button issue right now as we're talking about this, but we do know that BYU is going to the Big 12. They're heading out the door. They've been a really fun part to be in the WCC for a lot of sports, obviously, but for women's basketball, that's a sport that they've really excelled at for a long time. And Gonzaga and BYU have had a ton of battles on the basketball court. I'm curious what you think about them moving on, and if hopefully we'll continue to see Gonzaga versus BYU games, even if they have to happen in the non-conference slate. Curious if that's something that you guys have discussed yet or not.
Well, Jeff Judkins and I had talked about it a little bit, and now he's since been replaced by another coach. But there's certainly been someone who we've loved to hate, and that's kind of what rivalries are like, right? Where we don't want to play them, but at the same time we want to play them, and we just want to beat them. And so it's been a great rivalry since they've come into the league. I think it's going to be interesting going forward. I don't know if it reignites the situation we used to have prior to BYU coming in that was kind of a rivalry with St. Mary's. On the women's side, we've had a little bit of a chip on our shoulder against San Diego back and forth. They beat us in the WCC tournament, Courtney's freshman year, Courtney Vandersloot's freshman year. And so I know that there's a little bit there. I think everybody has a rivalry with Gonzaga, it seems like. But the conference is going to take a little bit of we're going to need to figure things out a little bit, because BYU and us are the only teams that have received at-large bids in my 18 years at Gonzaga. So I don't know if something had happened prior to that, then maybe I'm wrong. But since I've been there as an assistant and as a head coach, it's just been us. And so I think it's a good challenge for the rest of our conference to pick things up a little bit, to schedule the best we can to, we're always scheduling for an at-large bid, but for others to do the same, and then to go out there and win some of those games, because that is something that every time everybody plays us, they take a bump in their RPI or their net ranking. That's how we feel about BYU. And so we have to continue to do that for each other. And with the conference realignment that's happening right now, who knows? Who knows what the conference is going to look like? Yeah. It could be any of the people everyone's speculating. It could be people totally different. It's going to be really interesting to see how the chips fall. And with all the new stuff with NIL and the football stuff, and there's so many unknowns right now. But, we're looking forward to one more year having them in the conference, and hopefully getting to play them 3 times. And, I don't know about you, but I'm for the Zags winning all 3 of them. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's especially, at least get the last one. At least get the last one. Yeah,
that one's the best, it seems like. Yeah.
It sure is fun to get that last one. The WCC has taken really big strides, again, on the men's side for basketball. We've seen that quite a bit. And I think we've seen it a little bit on the women's side, too. I know Portland's a program that has kind of made some strides after being a little bit towards the bottom in the standings for a bit. And we've seen San Francisco, they had a pretty good year last year. Are you starting to see some of the other kind of conference teams start to take some of those bumps forward? I know BYU leaving is going to be a hit, because that's one tough game that they don't get to play every year, 2 tough games they don't get to play every year. But are you starting to see some of those other teams start to maybe pick it up a little bit and maybe hopefully create a little bit more parity in the league?
I think so. I mean, it's what you hope for, right? Yeah. And I know that things change, and we look in the conference, and if you take us out of it, then the second place team has kind of rotated around. Same thing happens with the Pac-12. Stanford's kind of always up there, but then the next best is kind of rotated around. And I think that's part of how it works in a cycle. But, Portland at some point was pretty low on where they were finishing consistently. And they've certainly done a great job there since they got there. They're extremely competitive. They're tough to beat. They recruit well. They coach their team well. And I think right now we have really great coaches in our conference. Some are younger, some are older, but they're all good. They're energized. I think they're trying to be current, and nobody's stuck in an old system that's not working well. If they either have an old system that works, or they're trying to do whatever is current and modern. And, it's good for all of us when the conference can improve. And so I think that's happening. It's not an overnight thing. It's a challenge. And recruiting is hard, especially with some of the new stuff. But I think that our coaches are doing a good job with it. And hopefully we'll continue to, we want to always be the best non-BCS football or non-football school conference that we can be, the best basketball conference out there. And so that's what we're always striving for. And I think that we're united in what that message is and what we're looking for as a conference. And so hopefully we can continue to attain it.
All right, third segment coming up. Lisa and I are going to discuss how the transfer portal and NIL have impacted women's basketball, as well as a reflection on Title IX 50 years later. But before we get there, let's talk about BetOnline. College basketball may be deep into the offseason, but the MLB, WNBA, and MLS seasons are heating up into the summer months. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for all of your betting needs and sports information. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all the latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all of the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. They have lines for coaching changes across every major sport, so even in the offseason, you can get your fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, you talked about the transfer portal a little bit, and that's kind of the next thing that I wanted to talk about. It's obviously that and NIL and now realignment have been kind of the most dominating topics in college athletics, really for the last year or so with the transfer portal and NIL. I'd love to hear your perspective on the transfer portal. Obviously, your team utilized it this offseason, has utilized it before, but it gets talked about so much within the context of football and men's basketball and how much of an impact it's had there. But it exists in every sport, and it's making an impact for teams' ability to kind of turn their rosters around. And looking at your squad and, of course, the other squads in the WCC, how much have you seen the portal having an impact?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting piece. We've used it as a supplement.
Sure.
We have only had 3 transfers in the last 8 years. So we are kind of an anomaly, to be honest with you. There's been a lot more places that have had a lot of transfers. And so I think that it's great for the supplemental use that we've had it for. A couple of these players we've recruited the first time, didn't get them, and we've gotten them back the next time around. That's Hayden Palmer, Chandler Smith, Caitlin Redmond, Sierra Walker, Brynna Maxwell. There's been a lot of those. We've also had some that we didn't know about necessarily the first time, or just fit a specific piece that we didn't know we were going to need. Right now we have Maud Hybens on our roster, and she's in that category. We didn't think we needed a post player at that time, but some things happened. People didn't stay, for a COVID year. And so she was just a great supplement. She's going to be a really good addition to our program. Yeah. So for us, I like it as a supplement. It is interesting though. I think that the players should have, the ability to leave. It's not a lifetime contract that they're signing.
Sure.
But it is interesting how it's kind of a free for all. Because I also see so much value. The players that we have for 4 years who stay and work through hard things, they grow so much. As adults, we know that the things you go through are the things you learn the most from. And so it's hard for me because you don't want a player to be in a situation that's a terrible situation. Of course, abuse, and there's all kinds of bad stuff out there. Yeah. But those ones who just don't want to do hard things and are looking for an easier way, those are the ones who I caution against, and I just am not sure if it's the right fit for, because I know that how much growth they would make if they would stick through and just see the perseverance at the end of it. So I think I'm a 50-50 on the portal. Certainly think that they should have that ability. I know I do. I can leave, and there's a consequence for me if I decided to go someplace else. But it isn't something I'm able to do. I just hope it'll be interesting to see also if it regulates once this COVID part is over, all these extra years that players have been given for the last, for the 4 years of the players who are on those teams. So I'm glad for it because we've been able to add some nice players to our program, and we're just trying to make sure that our players aren't leaving in mass. We're taking good care of them. We're trying to recruit the right ones the first time around so that, we can continue to benefit from keeping as many as we can.
Sure. And I mean, we talked earlier about like the development plan, and like, if you have athletes on a plan where, hey, maybe you're not going to be a starter in year 1, or maybe you're not going to be a starter in year 2, but like there's a development plan that's here, and there's a clear path to playing time in more playing time in a couple of years. It would be frustrating if people were maybe not as willing to put that time in and wait. And I can understand why, like, seeing players stick it out for 3 or 4 or 5 seasons, depending on the COVID year, is a fantastic way to ensure that somebody's going to be a big time contributor. And there's an element of that could be potentially getting lost at certain programs. It hasn't impacted the Gonzaga programs too much, but obviously you never know if that'll happen. But it is nice to see, like, yes, they should have freedom. That makes sense. Rationally, that they shouldn't feel like they're getting penalized if they want to leave a situation that is ugly or bad for them. But I do agree and understand with the concept of we wanted you here for 4 years for a reason. And it's unfortunate if you're not going to stick that out, because it disrupts our plans, and we had a vision for you.
Yeah. And not everything is a great fit. And, you don't always know that until you get there. But for us, the communication is a huge part, because the world is changing a little bit, and I think we're a little bit more instantaneous, and that's just the way of the times. Sure. But at the same time, if we communicate our expectations in advance, then I think that it helps everything. It's good for the players, it's good for the coaches, and so trying to have clear communication on what the expectations are and what the process is, and this is how we envision this in an honest way. We always say there's no smoke and mirrors when you come to Gonzaga. This is what you see is what you get. We're not cons. We're also not going to overly impress you with some sort of, we're just going to be hardworking, honest, communicate, take good care of you, pretty smart, pretty good at putting me in places to be successful. And then we'll see, where the chips fall.
So NIL is kind of the other big thing that has changed in college basketball recently. Of course, the ability for student athletes to make money off name, image, likeness. Again, another thing where the headlines have been dominated by football, mostly, a little bit men's basketball as well. But it's made its mark across all sports. And I know there was a lot of concern about whether this would be something that would unfairly impact athletes of certain programs, wouldn't impact athletes of other programs. And that hasn't always been the case. Certainly, there are still some things to be ironed out here with how NIL is being implemented by the NCAA. I don't think that is a controversial statement. It's been a little bit of the wild, wild west in a lot of ways, but I would love to hear kind of what your experience has been just seeing it with your athletes. Again, as we're recording this, it's basically exactly a year since it went into practice. So it's still pretty fresh. It's still pretty new, but I would love to hear what it's been like for you in the first year.
Well, I think it's actually a little bit like COVID. You remember when they first started saying, this is what's bad. No, this is what's bad. No, this is what's bad. You can get it like this. No, you can get it like that. I think with NIL, it just keeps changing so much because they're trying to figure it out. I think that they put what is it saying? The cart ahead of the horse a little bit on some of it. So they didn't have a full plan when they rolled it out. And so it just is an ever-changing situation. Yeah. I'm all for it. I think our players, if they want to work or find a way to benefit from who they are, I think that's great. I think it's kind of along the lines with the transfer thing. They have those rights and they should be able to execute them. And same thing with the NIL. If there's a bunch of people who want to buy a Kaylin Truong bobblehead, she should make the money from it. That's a Kaylin Truong bobblehead. And I know some people are creating content online. That's great. I'm always just cautious to the young women specifically on just know what you're selling exactly. That's all along. My concern was just that women are often put in a situation where they have to show more skin or, do this or that a little bit more. And I'm not totally for that part. I don't think they should be subjected to that. But our players have some of them taken advantage of it. And it's great. It's nice to have supplemental. It will be interesting going forward to see how it gets regulated and where the disparities come. I know right now there's a lot of state by state things and the collectives that are being formed are adding to the questioning of, is it pay for play or is it NIL? But I think the idea behind it is great. And, women's basketball is not making millions as a whole, or billions or trillions. And maybe that's what the football programs are making, or maybe that's what gymnastics is making. I can only speak for women's basketball, but I certainly think that the players are a huge part of that. And they deserve, their fair ability to try and profit off of what they do on the floor. And I just love the ones that are finding a way to balance it, because some people, I think it's too much to do both things well. And so that's also a thing that we're just trying to help them to figure out, what that looks like for each player and how you can have some success with this if you'd like to. And we have some people, to be honest with you, between all we feed them all the time. They get costs of attendance now. All the things that we can give to them away from NIL, who are like, it's not worth the bother for me. I don't want anything extra on my plate. And then we have some people who are pretty into it. And so just trying to show up and be supportive of, each side or each player in their own way.
Absolutely. Shout out to Shaniqua Nils, too, a women's basketball alumni who helped start the Friends of Spike collective, which is kind of helping student athletes at Gonzaga raise money. I had her on the podcast recently. It's very cool to kind of see the ways that they're attempting to help student athletes while also being understanding of what student athlete life is like, because that's something that I worked with student athletes and they had barely enough time to even meet with me for 10 minutes a week. So like trying to add something like this would be really, really difficult. And I could certainly understand student athletes who are like, I'm good. I don't need to worry about that. But obviously the opportunity to make money off of something, off of you effectively, and to kind of learn those skills is very valuable too. So it's kind of cool to see them trying to balance both of those things.
Yeah. Cause some people, some of them, it's a full-time job with hosting. And, I have a friend who it is her full-time job to be a face on social media and those kind of things. She makes lots of money from it, but it's her full-time job. And so a lot of people argue that athletes have 2 full-time jobs already between academics and athletics. And Shaniqua is doing great work. Her and Matt Santangelo have been really, really helpful. She's a great Zag who I can never hang out with enough. So happy to have her on our side.
All right, last question for you, Coach. The 50th anniversary of Title IX just recently passed. Obviously, a landmark ruling that helped even the playing field for women's athletics. I'm curious if you've had a chance to kind of reflect on 50 years in that kind of landscape, and also, we've seen women's basketball popularity has gone up. The WNBA is doing well right now. Certainly, college basketball has grown. Love to know kind of what you're hoping for the future of women's basketball, and kind of where we've come from now that this has been in place for a half a century now.
Yeah, I think that we have made huge strides. I mean, I'm 41, and it's very different now than it was when I was a kid.
Sure.
My mom will tell you that it's very different now than when she was a kid.
Sure.
And so I think the biggest growth we've had is in opportunity, which I think was the initial part of Title IX. We were trying to create the same opportunities for female athletes as male athletes had. And I feel great about the direction that that's going. Now it's become more of an equity thing. I know in the current times, let's be equitable. Let's share. I know the WBCA and the Women's Basketball Association, there was a lot of stir last year, 2 NCAA tournaments ago, the bubble, and that's well documented, and everybody knows about all of that. But I think just trying to level the playing field and make sure that we're being treated consistently to what our needs are as female athletes, not always the same as the men, if that's not what we need or what we're seeking, but just making sure that we're treated as well as women's athletes can be treated, or women athletes can be treated, and continuing with opportunities. I think that the Title IX with the football part, I think, has helped us certainly, because so many places, I think it's hurt some of or affected more, I guess I should say. I don't know if it's hurt, but affected more male sports, because the football teams are so big. And so there's, we have to have an equal part of that on the female side. And so I'm grateful for that. It doesn't look the same. And that's a great example of, we don't have to have women's football. We just have to have as many opportunities as a football team would have. And I think we still have work to do. There always will be, but I think we're in a good place going forward. And to be honest, 50 years is not that long in a big picture of things. It is to my kids. They would say that that's like eternity, right? But to those of us who are close, I mean, it's relatively new considering, and there's been some great change that's happened in the first 50, and I just hope for continued change over the next 50.
Absolutely. That's a perfect note to end on. Coach Lisa Fortier, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team looks like next season.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
All right, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much again to Coach Lisa Fortier for coming on to the podcast. Folks, don't forget to check out the new website for my written content at scorezagscore.com. Head there if you haven't looked at it already. We got another great guest joining the show for Wednesday's episode right here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Available wherever you get your podcasts, and of course, available on YouTube as well. Finally, thank you again to those of you who have made Locked On Zags your first listen of the day. There's no Locked On WCC, there's no Locked On Big East, and we're not sure if there is a Pac-12 going forward, but we do know there is a Locked On Pac-12 podcast, and you can all check that out. Make it your second listen of the day. Host Spencer McLaughlin and the local experts of Locked On take you across the Pac-12 in 30 minutes, 5 times per week. All right, thank you all for listening, and go Zags.